Hello there and welcome to the next part in our .NET Core 5 tutorial series. And in the previous video, we created this view where we could get a list out of all our ingredients from our database. So in this video, we're going to look at the next CRUD operation, and we're going to be looking at how we can actually create ingredients. So in order to do that, let's first create a button or a link to the page where we can actually create an ingredient. So let's open up our project and let's go into our ingredients index method, the one we have right here. And I want to display a button over here that's a link to the ingredients create page. And if we look here, we have this one fills out roughly half the screen. So let's just have the button sit on the other half of the screen. And let's create an anchor tag. And we have something called these ASP data tags that we can pop on, and they all start with ASP, and then we can say ASP action, for instance. This is the name of the action method, so basically the place we want to go. And we want to go to the create method. There's also something called the ASP controller, and we could specify that to being the ingredient controller. So that just means we want to go to the ingredient controller's create action. But if we leave out the controller part, it will assume we are working in the same controller, which we are because we are right now in the ingredients controller. We're going to give it a class to style it a bit. We're just going to call it a button and a button primary. And we're going to call it create new ingredient. So let's see how that looks in the browser. Okay, great. So we have this little ingredient button. It's a little close to the view here, so we can just go in and tell it to float right. And then it will place itself here in the right corner, which looks a little better, gives it a bit more space. So if I press this right now, it's just going to crash because we don't have the create method implemented. So let's go to the ingredients controller and create a new method. Returns an IX and result. That way it indicates it's a place we can go to. You know, we can type it up into the URL and we can access this action. We're going to call it create. We're going to return out a view. There we go. Now there's no more red squiggly lines, and we are going to call this for the get create, because we're essentially going to have to need two different create methods, because when you perform a get request, you want to go to the page that has the form, and if you perform a post request, you want to go and actually save the data. So right now we are creating just the visual page. So again, now we have created the actual method. Now we need to create the associated view. So we just right click and press add view. Gonna add a razor view, and we're just gonna leave these for the defaults. Gonna press add. And there we have our view. Now I'm just gonna remove the top part here, and I am gonna write add model ingredient to let it know that this particular page is working with the ingredient model because we want to create an ingredient. And you'll see why we're doing this in a second. I just want to save this, and I want to go back in the browser and actually see if our button now works, or if our link works and we get to that page. And we do. We can see we're now at the ingredients create page, and it just says create on the screen. So right now we want to create an actual form so that we can create our ingredient. So first, let's just quickly mark up a simple view. Whoops. There we go. I'm going to make a row here. Let's just get this up and running. Okay, so I'm going to make a simple row, and let's just make this a, let's say, a col6. You know what? We can just make the screen a little bit smaller. Let's make this a col column 8, and then down here we are going to make this a column 4. There we go. We're going to make a comment that just says leave empty. So this is just to make the screen a little bit smaller. All this is not important, this is just styling and we're not too worried about it, so we're just going to quickly mock something up. Let's make an H2 and call it create ingredients. And let's just quickly run that and see it in action. There we go. And then we want to create the actual form. You know, we can just go ahead and do it in here. So the first thing we need is a form group. I'm going to make it on new row. There we go. And we will need a label and we'll need a input field. So an ingredient, let's go into the model again and refresh. What does it have? It has an ID, which is the primary key, so that's going to auto increment, so we don't want to be able to set that. And then it has a name. So it's pretty simple. So let's go back to the create here, and then let's create a let's say a col for the actual label. I'm going to put the label in there, and then we are going to create a col 8 for the actual input element. And let's put the input element in here, and let's say input, and then we have a really cool feature here. We can say ASP for name. I'm going to give it a class of form control, and that's it. So by specifying that this input field is for the name property of our ingredient model, then it will know what we're talking about. So by having defined that this view will work with the ingredients, it will know that this input field refers to the name table or the name property in the ingredient model. Now I can quickly see we need a form that we have not created yet. So let's just quickly create a post method and then give it an action of create, because that's where we are going to go when we submit this form. We're just going to paste this down in the bottom here, and it moves everything in for us. Great. So let's also create a label for this, and we can do the same thing. We can say make a label ASP for the name, and it'll know which one it is, and it'll even input the default value. So let's just save this and run it up. And there we go. Now we get the name label right here, and we get the actual input field. Awesome. So now we just need a button, and we should be good to go. So that's just a basic submit button. So let's just create a new row. And you know what? Let's make 2 buttons here. Call 6. There we go. So we're going to make a submit button, or input of type submit. I'm going to give it a class of btn info. And then right below it, let's make a back button, which is going to be, again, this is a link. And let's give it an action of index so we can go back to the original screen. You know what? Let's give this one the info and this one the success. Let's try that, and let's give both a width of 100 so they are of equal sizes. Let's just try and run that and see. Oh, well, that did not look too great, did it? What did we do here? Oh yeah, of course, I closed off the link the wrong way. There we go. Close it off properly. There we go. Now we have the back button, we have the send button. They should probably switch places, right? But let's just quickly give this one a value of create so it doesn't have the send. There we go. And then we're just going to switch these two so we get it like this. There we go. So we can create right here and we can go back right there. And if we press back, we should go back to the list, which we do. And then we should be good to go. So when we press the create button, it's going to perform a post request to the create method. But if we go into our ingredient controller, we only have a get create method. So we actually need to create a post method. So essentially our create method has two different ways of accessing it. One is going to be a simple create and one is going to be the post. And the way we do this is that we give it the same signature, call it the same name, but this one is going to take in an ingredient as an object. So it's going to take in the ingredient model. On top of that, we are going to put these ASP tags here, the data tags, and we are going to say this is an HTTP post. And we will also validate the NC forgery token. You can read more about what that does, but essentially it's just a good idea to do whenever you're working against or working with any form of data. It protects you against forgery and tampering attacks. So I just always include it. We are going to return a view, just so all the red lines are gone, and there we go. So this method is going to be called whenever we perform the post request. So we need in here to add the ingredient to the database. So how do we do that? Well, first, it's a good idea to check something called the model state.isValid. It's just a form of validation. It checks that the model is valid. Now, if it is not valid, we will simply return the view out, and we're going to put in the object into the view as well. But if it is valid, we want to add it to the database. So it's actually in here that we're going to do that. And this is very cool. And again, now you see some of the magic that the .NET Core framework has to offer. And again, you see why all this setup and all the configuration starts to pay off, because now we can just say db.ingredients.add the object that we get passed in right here. And then we will tell it to save the changes. And that's it. The ingredient object that we get passed in right here is going to be populated because in our create method, we are telling this particular page that we're working with an ingredient model, and everything we have here is specified that, this is the input field for the name property. So whenever we submit this post, it's going to wrap up everything and create an ingredient model for us, and it's going to pass in that ingredient model into the create method here. So this object is going to be populated with those fields. Just check that the submitted values are valid, that the object is valid, and then we can simply ask the ingredients table to add it. We can save the changes. Then we're just going to return a redirect to action, so we can redirect to a different page, and we want to go back to the index page, because then when we create a ingredient, we go back to the page where we can see all the ingredients. So let's take this for a spin. Go into my ingredients. I press create new ingredients, and I will make a new ingredient. Let's say I want to make corn. I press create, and we can now see that corn has been added to our database. So we now have a functioning create system implemented. And the code is very clean because we get a lot of free functionality. If we go into the create method, a lot of it is just visual. It's just Bootstrap. It's just HTML. The real magic is happening due to this line and due to the fact that we use the ASP action tags in our HTML code. And then we can simply be very brief. When we go into the controller, we can just tell the database to add it, save the changes, and it's done. So this is one of the wonderful parts about this whole framework and this whole way of doing it. And again, even if there is some configuration at the beginning, it's really starting to pay off. So now we have implemented a second of our 4 CRUD operations. We can now create and we can now read. So now we just need to be able to update and delete our ingredients. And we're going to look at that in the next video.